Hi, I'm sorry the last video got cut off, and I will continue to check this to see if it does that again. I'm just going to continue the local color project and just kind of paint for a while. My yellow in this lighting looks better. Your yellow should be really warm. And my last couple things with the wheel and the other thing, it just, no matter what light I put on it, it came out milky and chalky. And you don't want to ever use a paint that's chalky because it doesn't have the temperature. So this is very bright cadmium yellow medium, and it appears that way, I believe. So I set this up. I mixed red, blue, and yellow to get this mud mixture, making sure it was neutralized. And you always want a separate little pile so you don't contaminate that. Same with the red. I mixed it thoroughly with a palette knife. You want to mix them really well and not just leave them there as a blob, because the consistency is so important. And when you reach for it, you don't want to have to be mixing in the process, especially with acrylic, because it dries so dark. I mean, not only does it dry dark, but it doesn't have the right flow and consistency and smooth texture when you're doing it from a blob. So you got to really kind of massage the pile until it looks like a margarine consistency. Okay, I'm just going to sit here and paint. I think I was able to capture some of this purpley orangey hue. Of course, my value is too dark. So I'm just going to start comparing and contrasting. Every time you block in one area, the other area is affected. So you want to paint in big areas, not just one thing. You can zoom in later on one thing when you're finessing it and doing details, but for the overall composition, every time you put a value here or color here, it affects how this one appears. So we really want to get these blocked in, the big relationships. And I'm just going to keep going, and make sure you don't lose sight of the drawing. You don't want to get off kilter. All right, I'm just going to sit here and paint. Okay. Let's see. I want to take a look in here again at this hue. And you know, you can kind of see when you put it next to it. You want to have your picture above or right to the side. I like it above because it creates kind of a vertical for the eye. And then of course you want to stand up and prop it often so you can check it. A lot of times you won't know for 24 hours if you're anywhere near there. When you come back and it's dry, that's when you find out all the mistakes and the things that worked out. So I gotta adjust the value, gotta change some shapes. But I want to start looking at this area, not this thing. It's this relationship between things. That's what painting is. It's not, oh, look at this, you know, you want it to be all the way these things relate to one another, just like in a drawing. Okay, let's see what I want to do. All right, so I know this is too dark and too orange. That's more purpley pink. Red violet is a big factor here. All right, so I'm just going to start painting. I'm going to start in a pool of white. Sorry, my piles are so small because this palette is way too small. But it was the only way I could fit it in here because it's very difficult unless you had like a professional photographer or something. But I think this will work because you can still see. And I'm still nuancing the pile because it's still not the right consistency. You don't want it runny, but you don't want it lumpy. Remember, what this looks like, that looks like. There's no shortcuts. Alright, so I know there's some kind of a red violet. And you can mix the tertiaries and the secondaries too, if that's helpful. That's pretty pink. Hold it up, always. It needs to be neutralized. So I can neutralize with either green or black. Remember, black is very sparing. and it takes over. Remember, piles within piles. There's a little mud there, so I was able to use that. Boom, boom, boom. Closer, but definitely needs blue. Just a tiny, I use this to scrape, see it takes over. That's way too blue, but I'm gonna leave it there because I might use it somewhere. Back here, we use. Once I get all these piles and piles, then I can start painting. I always do that with a palette knife just to see. Alright, I'm close enough now that I can start blocking this in. I'm going to use a brush that's similar in size to the area so I don't go too big or too small. Usually people use too small of a brush. Now I can correct this shape too. It's more angular and structural. We want to go back and forth until you get that edge clean. Problem with pencil drawings is there's mushy underneath. We don't use pencil on canvas, it's too pointy. But in this case, the pencil, it smears a bit, but eventually you'll cover it. Oh, that's pretty good, pretty good. See, it gets purpley down there, but up there it's orangey. Even in this area, I want to make sure to blend in these other. It's kind of a you know, I have options. I can grab, whoops, I can grab from here when I see the shift. There's a shadow up there, so I can grab it. I should have made more darker value. But if I don't have that over there, I don't have the option. when I see it to get it. Do a tiny bit of black right here just to have this a little bit darker value to blend in. I'm going to do it quickly before it dries. You can see that little shadow there. Hopefully you can. Look and see. You can see that shadow up there in the corner. That's what I'm working on. I also wanted you to see the bottom, but that little dark on the bottom of this one is key. Okay. So here's the shadow. Pretty happy with what I got on the shadow here. Crisscross, crisscross. Because even though it's a flat table and you think it's side to side, it feels more like a distant space. So I want to do crisscross, crisscross. And I could do 2 brushes here too. I believe I will come back and do that later when I'm putting more paint on there. So right now I'm really trying to match. This is still an underpainting. And that little bit of black and brown helped. I see one there, I'm going to place it. And I see this dark here, I'm just going to place it. You notice that the only brushes I have out are flat. There is just no line in this entire painting. Maybe a dot here and there, but we really don't use. Let me get distracted. Got too watery. Pretty good about this color. The urge to start dipping everywhere. Sometimes you gotta grab it when you see it though. I should have had more warm temperatures out here. I have a lot of cool ones. But I'm gonna nuance a little more oranges mixed in with this so that we have other options besides purplies and browns and blacks. And I'm gonna put a little white pink in there too. And then I'll mix a little blue here. Alright, so now I've got some greenish orangish stuff going on over here, along with my brownish, blackish, coolish, pinkish. Whoops, that's no good. You can always have a little test sheet on the side too. See how similar in value these are? And then it shifts into a darker value. Now this is where I want to start using a smaller brush as I blend. Leaning on my pinky. I need a purple. This one needs more. And see, now I'm like, okay, now I need more purples. So I'm really weaving around the color wheel at this point. There is my red violet. I'm gonna mix a little bit with brown too, and a little bit with one of these pinks or whites to the side. So you can see how quickly your palette gets covered with these gorgeous colors. Now I'm more in the purplies. I got the oranges, I got the grays and the pinkies and the yellows a bit, but more oranges and reds weaving around. So now as I switch to my smaller brush, got a little watery there, so I'm going to pick up more paint. You don't want it watery, but you don't want it blobby. And worst thing is when you create texture, because you can't get rid of that. See that little thing? And a little bit of red. It's all very soft in the back. It has that atmospheric perspective. I'm just going off the edge because my board is too big for the scale. This is a very pointy, tall, rectangular type of a subject. So I'm really looking at the picture to make sure I get it where it goes. And then I can use this little brush to blend in here too. That's a little more grayish greenish. So I'm missing a greenish. Remember, when this dries out, all you have to do is move over the piles that you feel like are working. Even take a picture so that you remember what you made. I know it's hard to remake it every time, but that's the process of this painting. It's not just about your rendering skills, it's about learning to reduplicate, recreate. There's a green. I needed that green. I see a green up here. I hope you can see how green it is in the corner. And I'm exaggerating it because I want to make sure it's in there. And then I can blend it into the original, which is still on this brush, so that it doesn't dry, because you can blend on top, on top, on top. Okay. Go back over here. Should I do more of a pink? See, I got my pink there. I'm like, yay, I still have my pinks, because this is pink. I gotta get the shape. But this blends into the background. It's not a hard edge. Even this edge is a little fuzzy, so I can go back and forth till it gets fuzzy. Fuzzy things are hard to render, but you just have to go back and forth along the line, the edge, until they look far away. Oh, it's got blue in it. Put a little blue in there. And red. Just getting to know this thing. Too red. Go back to my red violet. And I'm going to come back and paint this again. I just want to get these relationships. Back here it's dark. We've got our shadow. When it starts to get dry brushy and you can't blend it, just switch back to your larger brush that has the other color on it. My larger brush has too dark of a value on it. I'm going to split this pile. I feel like my background is getting too dark. And remember, it dries darker too. I'm going to saturate this brush in this value and mix this lighter value in here. It's whiter and pinker. And I only know that because I did this. So now I can see there's a jump that I don't have that I need to. So I'm going to add this pink just a little to this white. I call it pink, but it's got, things are mushing a little, so I've got this mud. It's white, but it's orange, but it's mud. Oh, here we go. Okay, now we're getting a little more pink. And now I can paint around that shadow there. And when I put this on the wall, I'll be able to paint holding this further away, but I can still do it here. It's just such a small area that it can be challenging to not hold it far away. But see how much lighter it is here. See this lightness? So I can block in how these values are so close together and correct my mistake the last time. Best thing you can do is remember to let the shape go. If you stay committed to the shape, you're going to lose sight of the painting. It's more about the values. Like this edge, I don't care the shape right now. I don't care. I'm looking at the values of this compared to this. That's what's most important. See, now I'm getting the value right here, and I'm doing some cross contour. And you can see how the bigger brush, and I can use it far away if I'm not sitting. I'm doing cross contour, and now I'm going to blend into that to make sure, oh, that color is still pretty good. So I'm going to find it over here. And I can do it with another brush, or I can do it with this brush. It depends how close they are. Oh, here's red violet. That's what I want. I should mix a pile of that. Okay. So instead of getting in a bad habit, I'm going to take what I just dipped and put it in a pile away. It's got to be, you got to remember to do that part, because otherwise you're going to just get streaky, and it's not a good habit. It's not a good painting discipline. So I'm going to crisscross this in. Now see this edge? It's got a little lumpy orange, fluttery sort of an edge. Instead of painting that edge with a line, remember like we did in the black and white, I paint around it to get that little lumpy edge. And luckily I put orange in there before. So I'm now starting to go erring on the side of white because I see that I've gone too dark. And here there's an edge of light. You can see how I'm placing and pulling it back. I forget if I said I wasn't going to talk, but I just can't help it. I mean, inside my head is talking anyway about it, so hopefully it's helpful to see the process. Okay, now this edge, I'm going to create more of this edge here by painting around it. And I'm not outlining it. Again, the shape is not what I'm after. Sometimes if your palette knife gets dirty, it's actually helpful at this point. As long as you have your other piles in the mix. It's more red. Such a pretty color. It's very purpley. Sometimes you get the color right. Usually you have to take the color and put it in a pool of white because it gets so dark. Now this would be an opportunity to use more than one brush for blending. This is my smaller brush for the ins and outs. But really what we want are 2 brushes in similar size, or 3 even. More so with value. But see how I'm going to saturate this brush in this color and leave that one this color. So I can block this in and then switch brushes and blend this in. Now before I get too far into the blending, I gotta realize there's more red in here. So I'm gonna take a little red and add that here. It's actually red and orange. Everything's in everything, you know? You can't just go, oh, it's purple. It's purpley, but it has other stuff going on. It's orangey. The more you paint on this picture over the month, the more you'll realize that you're getting to know it. And once you start to get to know it, when you face your painting each day, it's like a relationship again. It's like you just start to figure things out, and it gets easier. Even though this is such a hard task, it gets easier. I'm doing a little cross contour because it's flat on the top, but it goes in. Whoever took the picture was right here. So it goes this way there, and then it switches like a beach ball. And now, switch brushes. The great thing about having this light value on the other one is it keeps me from getting too dark. This is such a soft blend. This picture doesn't have a whole lot of hard edges. And there's moments, but it's not. So even though I'm kind of dwelling on an area just a little, it's really more to see this relationship. Because you can't tell what the relationship is until you find out what's around it. See that this purple is more blended here and more edgy right there. I can take my smaller brush, get this orange real quick because I see orange in here. I started it, but I gotta add more. I'm gonna add the orange. Not totally orange, but it's orange-ish. That little bit of yellow is going to help me see what's going on here. Get more neutralized. It's yellower here, and then it gets more neutralized over here. So these are just like training your eye to see. And you do this enough, and it starts to really come together. And again, I'm going to paint this many times, but I'm getting to know it. I think when I come back, I'm going to put more red in it, but the values are getting better. Now I got to deal with this thing, and I'm going to use the brush that has a lighter value on it just so I don't get too dark. And I'm going to put this in here. It has a lot of ultramarine, which is like a royal blue. It's a beautiful blue, really creates a coolness that you wouldn't get with other versions of blue. Let's try that. I'm going to neutralize it with a little black, but you have to use a scrapey amount. I put too much out. Sometimes that's what it requires, is a dot of black when you're not sure and the blue isn't quite getting it there, or the purplies. Look how much better that value is. I might weave some more red and blue into this. It's too dark, but now see how the value here, it's a semi-hard edge. It's a broken edge, but it's still somewhat of a edge. Now I can start to see the values are getting better. And you know what, now that I'm over here, I'm going to go back to my original color of the background and just block it in over here. I need to add some more. I ran out kind of that color. But if I can block this here, even if it's a wash, I can also take note that my shape got off. But that's not important right now. Just blocking in this lighter value in here quickly. Remember, you want to think of it as a whole all the time, especially when you're just starting out. And then I can notice that since I have this brush here, I'll just put a little, it's not black though, it's brown here. I can correct this. That's too dark. This shape is off. Way too dark, obviously, but I can always make a shape and then paint around it like we did before. This one's a little less fuzzy. As it comes forward, it's going to get a little less fuzzy wherever you go. And while I have this on here, sometimes when you have it on your brush, scan where else you can put it. way too dark. But it's got more purple in it. See, again, that black, it just overpowers the values that should be a little bit softer. So it's too dark, but at least I'm still drawing, right? I can also use this to blend in here, since it's still on my brush. Soften it a little. And I can use some of that to show the shadow. Even though it is redder and it is lighter and purplier, I now have 3 brushes going. And it goes in here. This is going to be fun to paint. I'll do like a little example just because it's fun. And then this is too low down here, but I'll make a note of that, and I can do it right now with what's left of my white, which is always gone. I can remind myself by just blocking this in. Kind of that pink color that I had over here. But this is a point where you want to start washing, moving, new water, all that stuff, because you don't want it to start to stick and get that dry thing. But I wanted to show you real quick, because this is going to be a light edge here. Remember, we don't make lines for the most part. You see that edge. It's not a line, it's an edge. So I'm going to make an edge in a big brush, bigger than what it is. It's much lighter than that. See, but I'm out of white. It's a bummer when that happens. I should know better to put more out at the beginning. But this is just lighter here. I can make it lighter. And it turns orange right here. Isn't that cool? Where's my orange? There's my orange. Check that out. It turns orange. Anyway, so when I get to do this part, I would make a blob here of that little soap thing. It's like a indent thing. And again, it doesn't matter what it is. It's a series of values and shapes. But see how this thing indents? You want it to look like it's in. And a lot of times people will do like highlights or teardrops or whatever, and they stick out as if they're floating on the surface. So the only way to get them to go in is to make them bigger than what they are, let them dry, and then shape them. See, I'm kind of all over the place, but that's good to be. See, this is way too small of a brush for that area, so switch. It needs more red. Red and purple. And there's a light in between. We have to get to that later. Okay, so, but let's say this dried. Let me make it bigger, because if I make it, I don't want to really make it like what it is. I want to make it bigger, at least enough bigger to shape it. This gets lighter on the side, so I don't want to, you don't want to do this until you have the inside part good. Purple, purple. Like, I don't want to just do a dark here, because you can see that's dark and that's half and half. This blends into the other half of it. You want to get all that work done first before you go and shape around it, because if you shape around it and then you look at the inside and it's too flat and it doesn't show the transition, then you've wasted your time. You've wasted your, see, I'm putting blue because it's cooler. Even though the shape is not what it is, I'm looking at the inside of that thing, because it has a value shift within it. kind of blue, it's kind of brown. After this, I'm going to wash everything. So this will be the end. I'm making it bigger, but I'm making the darker edge. Okay, I'm making it bigger than it is, but it definitely is darker on this side than this, and warmer on one side than the other. So, and I have to use a small brush to get in here, so I'm using the same one just because you guys don't have that many. See how that shape is starting to, it's too big, but I want it too big because I'm about to shape it on the edge. And I can start softening these values that are so obviously too dark. Even if it gets messy, it's fine. Okay. Now, to shape it, you should let it dry completely, but just for the sake of this demo before I stop, I'm going to put a light, it's not a white, but it's a light. And it's very neutralized. It's not really purple or yellow. But see, I worked on that, now look what I can do. Paint around it to shape it exactly like the picture. And then this is flatter here. And if I got it too small, which I think I did, at least I'm familiar with it now. And then we can push this into the hole. And then you just go like this. But see how it's starting to push in? By virtue of that shape around instead of on top. You always want to move around. That's why I prefer working vertically. I can really get around it. All right, so as I'm pushing this in, now I can add with my bigger brush, the purpley, around it, darker, and leave that edge, that little edge. And I think it's too dark, obviously, but that's the technique. This one too, you want to go up to the edge of it. So just try to remember to make it bigger than it is, because things always get smaller as they go. And if I had more white, I could keep going. But you know what? I'm gonna stop and wash everything and decide what colors I need and what I am gonna want to transfer onto my new palette paper. So in, out, and around. That's how you achieve three-dimensionality. And I still, if I need to lighten within it a little, because I see this side still a little bit too dark, I can do it. But I don't want to do it to the point where I lose that technique. I just had it too dark in there. See, now you can start to see. I had it too dark. That's why the effect wasn't working. Too yellow, but You can see where I'm headed with this. Yeah, I'm digging it. And when I come back, I'm not gonna come back to this today. Hopefully this is enough to get you started. And you know what? I'm gonna just quickly put some orange in an area that since I have this paint, let me just do a quick orange, because I want it, that middle part's really bothering me. So I can do a quick orange mixed with this stuff. Like before you get your palette clean, you can kind of go like this, rather than, if you took a picture of it, that's helpful. But even if you didn't, if you can just kind of quickly get some of the bigger areas before you wash everything. You know, with local color, the most beautiful things that happen are at the end of the day. When you look at your palette at the end of the day, that's when you get these gorgeous colors. And even if you're just quickly matching the value that you hadn't before, or the shape, it's just a little bit of a last minute thing to remind you that it was warm, but I feel like I overdid it. But anyway, I don't want to get too distracted here, but I do know that this is going to blend into this, and I'm just kind of using up, and then I'm going to leave this edge because you can see how that, it's totally orange though right here. So you know what, even though I have it way too orange, it's something I just did for myself so that when I come back later I can go, you know, I must have seen orange in there. It's there. So now I just have to adjust it based on, you know, my purplies or whatever's in here. I exaggerated it, but there's a lot of mud in there. So don't try to boil any water while you're doing this, because I tell you what, I've burnt a lot of pans because it's a whole situation. I'm starting to see this cool, kind of blendy, kind of butterscotchy kind of a, I don't know what it is, even though it's soap. It's, see all this stuff? And it's pink, it's pink, it's pink. Do I have any pink left? It's pink, it's red, it's, so this is a good thing to do when you're about to quit for the day or you want to wash everything. It's just kind of block in. Even though I got the color completely wrong, I'm feeling pretty good about the value and the temperature on the inside. So it's starting to come together. You can kind of use up your paint in spots if it's helpful. I have to still lighten that, etc. And I also know next time I'll use more white. So, but I tell you, these colors get so complex and beautiful. You're really kind of learning in the moment. And of course, I want to hold this up to the wall now. Obviously, you know, I got lots to fix, but